When I was fishing at Oldvark earlier in the week, I mentioned on a video about the rivers Ewer and Ouse, and when the Ewer becomes the Ouse and where that is, and it's all to do with this little beck called Ousegill Beck. Anyhow, I was intrigued by the whole business, so I went back to have a look at it again to see how this has come about. And I've come across some information on the Great Ouseburn and Little Ouseburn parish document. And this is what it says. The bits underlined in red are perhaps the most interesting bits. I'll just read it. Well, I'll read the whole thing out anyway. The villages of Great and Little Ouseburn take their name from the River Ouse, which starts as Ousegill Beck in the garden of the old Great Ouseburn workhouse. As the original source of the Ouse, the spring now emerges about 35 metres away, stands a stone column bearing the inscription Ouse Riverhead, Ousegill Spring, York 13 miles and Boroughbridge 4 miles, and then Ousegill Beck flows for 4 miles before joining the River Ewer, a broad river of about 60 miles in length. Here the tiny Ousegill Beck usurps the power of the Ewer and gives its name to the river, which flows through York to the Humber estuary and into the North Sea. So that was a bit intriguing there about this stone column. And it goes on. The marshy meadows alongside Ousegill Beck are now a site of interest in nature, don't worry about that. And then below Great Ouseburn, the stream is fed by a perennial spring known as the Stockwell. And this spring varies in neither temperature, I should say no volume, or volume throughout the year. And then down by the bridge near the church, there used to be a big lake there, a top lake. A little bit of information there. I was intrigued by these things. Where the beck entered the lake, it used to be an island, where in the late 1800s the writer Edmund Bogg, whoever he was, saw a spreading ash tree cut down containing 432 ruck's nests. He also states that the water swarmed with pike and trout. I wish they did now. The butterbump, or bittern, I've never heard that word used before, the butterbump, frequented the area, and will-o'-the-wisps were seen almost nightly in the marsh meadows. Will-o'-the-wisps are sort of strange green flame, which you see at night over marshy ground. All sorts of rumours about it. Superstitions about this phosphorescent green flame. As you move towards it, it moves away, and then you follow it, and it leads you into danger. The gases which come from marshes are produced by rotting vegetation, and there's a couple of them. Phosphine is one, and I can't remember the name of the other one. But when they come into contact with oxygen in the air, they produce this strange green flame, which is it's quite difficult to see in daylight, but easy to see in the dark. I remember making it once for a class in science. It produced a hell of a lot of smoke and it gassed everybody. But that's what will-o'-the-wisp is. And of course now marshes have all been drained off to produce farm, agricultural land. It's a phenomenon you don't see now, except where, probably in the fens you might see it. But as I say, it used to be quite common. Anyway, where was this stone and where was this Stockwell? Well, I couldn't find them on the maps I've got at home, so by the miracle of the internet, what a useful thing this is, I found this website superb, from the National Library of Scotland, of all places. And they put on their website, you can look at maps side by side. You can look at an old map on one half of the screen, and on the other half of the screen it's got Google Earth, and you can move the cursor about, which is useful in two ways. One, if you want to find out what was there beforehand, you can move the cursor on the modern map and the cursor moves parallel on the old map. But in my case it was the other way around. On the old map it showed this stone marked and it showed this Stockwell marked. So by moving the cursor onto the stone on the old map, the cursor on the Google Earth map, it moved to the exact spot, so I knew exactly where it was. I'll show you it anyway. I'll have a look at it. Obviously it doesn't show up very well on when you're videoing computer screens, you get all this interference. But this left-hand map is the 1913 Ordnance Survey map. In fact, some of them go back before that, about 1888. And on this side is Google Earth today. And you'll see this little cursor there. And if I move it, you'll see on the other side, on the old map, the cursor also moves. Now if I zoom in, and I find this, there it is. This is the Great Ousburn Workhouse. This is the old map. If I move in, there you can see this stone. There. As I wiggle that cursor about, you can see the one on the Google Earth moving about. So where that little plus sign is on the Google Earth map is where this stone is. Amazing. If I just zoom out, oh yeah, no. And I zoom into this Stockwell. There it is. And if I just put the cursor on the old map on Stockwell, you can see where exactly it is on the today. It's in that little clump of trees there. That's where it is. But how you get to it's another matter altogether. But at least I know where it is. It's there, right where that little plus sign is. And I think that website's amazing. It's very addictive. I think I called it stone well when I was looking for this well. It is in fact called Stockwell. Just by way of a little correction. This is the infirmary building at Great Ousburn Union Workhouse. I think it's been used as housing. And if I just turn round, in the garden of this building is this big stone column. With inscriptions on it. And on this side it says Ouse River Head, although it's probably quite difficult to see. If I move around to this side, it says Borough Bridge 4 miles. And on this side it says Ouse Gill Spring. Complete it. This side it says York 13 miles. And it's just standing here neglected. So this is the source of the River Ouse. There's a spring which actually seems to have been covered in, but it reappears in a field. And on the top it's got a spike. It's obviously had something, there's obviously been something extra on top of there. It's obviously fallen off. Oh, what a great shame, it's just sort of sitting here abandoned. So there you can see the old infirmary buildings, and the stone stands at the back of their garden. But the spring has obviously been culverted in and it emerges here. So this is the beginning of Ousgill Beck, or indeed the beginning of the River Ouse for that matter. So this is the beginning of the River Ouse, Ousgill Beck, one of the largest rivers in England. Amazing. The beck is only 4.5 miles long before it meets the River WWII at Cuddy Shore Reach, where it forms the beginning of the River Ouse. The other thing mentioned on the Great Ousburn website is a spring called Stockwell, which is taken some finding. It's in this absolute jungle. I mean, this is winter time. How you would find this in the summer, I have no idea. But anyway, in front of me is sort of obviously been a stone structure, a little square thing with lots of stones round about, and coming out of the ground is a spring. So the spring emanates just by this tree covered with ivy. If I just turn round, there you can see the Great Ousburn village over the top of this hill. Anyway, I find my way back to the car now. I should add that the stone pillar which marks the source of the Ouse and stone well at Great Ouseburn, they're on private land. You can't just go meandering across to look for them. Well, this sign which I photographed years ago is still here. Much to my amazement. It may even be a new sign. But anyway, this is where the River Ure joins Ousegill Beck behind me and forms the River Ouse, which goes all the way down to the junction with the Trent, where the River Trent comes in, at which point it becomes the River Humber, or the Humber Estuary. If I just turn round, there you can see the River Ure, and over there, amongst that tangle of branches, is a floodgate to stop the river backing up Ousegill Beck. You can't actually see it, but I'm assured there's one there, where that big oak tree is. And down here, with the sunlight, is the River Ouse. Well, I find that amazing, and more to the point, nobody can really explain how it came about. It seems to go back hundreds of years. I mean, some information says that the River Ure becomes the Ouse where it joins the River Swale at Myton, which is about 6 miles upstream. But it's not true, and indeed on some maps below the River Swale Ure junction at Myton, the river is marked on as the River Ouse, but it isn't. It's still the River Ure until it gets down to this. You wouldn't even know there was a beck over there coming into the river. It doesn't look any different. So, there it is, where that big oak tree is on the opposite bank. Is where Ousegill Beck comes in. You wouldn't even notice. It's just a great tangle of bushes. And it's very, very tiny. And why its name should have been the chosen name for the river below this point, I have no idea. Nobody else seems to know either. It seems to have been lost in the mists of time. How weird. Anyway, I've got a few maggots I must finish off, so I'll walk back upstream and I'll just get rid of them. If it's anything like Oldvark the other day, then it's going to be a pretty joyless experience. Well, I'm down at Hunter's Lodge, a lead stretch on the top end of which is on the River Ure, and the bottom end of which is the River Ouse. And I've just got a few maggots I need to get rid of, so I'll just fish the River Ure part, the first peg, as you come into the field. It's 1:30 and it's Wednesday the 14th of December, and it's a lovely day. It's 10 degrees. Next week it promises to be somewhat colder. days. I've been here 5 minutes. Well, a little roach, a little tiny roach, bright red eye shining in the sun. Well, it's been an interesting afternoon. A little bit of history, and a little bit of geography, and a little bit of fishing. Lots of tip action, but converting it into fish on the bank is really difficult. There must be a technique to it. Anyway, it's been a beautiful afternoon, and it's still nice and warm. Amazing. But from the very lowest reaches of the Yore, I'll see you another time. Take care. Bye-bye. During the Second World War in 1942, there was obviously a secret flight taking place with Russian officers. They took off from Hendon in London, flew to Edinburgh, and on the way back, this de Havilland Flamingo aircraft crashed in a field behind Vine House in Great Ousburn. And there are 2 plaques on the wall here, which were put up in 2012. When all this came out, at the time, it was absolutely top secret. Everything was hushed up. So when the plane crashed, then security from Linton and Ouse RAF base arrived and no one was allowed near it. But what's quite interesting is that one of these plaques is in Russian. It's just looking down the street at Great Ousburn, and if I just turn around slowly, just up over the hill there's the post office. So it's on the way out of the village towards Oldvark. The scaffolding down there is on the roof of the school.